Now is a more
Another scare
crucial time than
campaign
ever
for Mr.
for those
Howard.
with broken family values to stand up and be counted.
Hi, welcome back to YouDecide 2007, and you certainly did decide last weekend very emphatically. So we've got a slightly rotated panel this time to look at your final decisions on our website, YouDecide2007.org. We've got, as most times, Dale Spender, got Caroline Marahasi, back fresh from rehearsals and auditions in Sydney. We've got Ben Eltham. Ben's a newcomer. He's a fellow with the Centre for Policy Development, a Sydney-based left-of-centre think tank. And we've got campaigning maestro, Warwick Powell, CEO of Transpac Research, as our final panellist today. And of course, I'm Graham Young. I'm the founder and chief editor of Online Opinion. First off, we're going to have a look at the final contribution from the website YouDecide2007.org to see what you thought about your decision.
I'm looking forward to a new vision for education, for cooperation on health, an improvement in the plight of Indigenous people, action on climate change and fairer workplace laws. I was heartened that, at the possible dawn of a new progressive era, Kevin Rudd chose to acknowledge the approaching end of Bernie Banton's brave life. Yet last night's victory is also a challenge to Mr Rudd to acknowledge the debt owed to the Greens in ousting the Howard government. With the new Senate still emerging, it is to be hoped that the progressive note sounded by the vote in the House of Representatives will be echoed in the House of Review. It is a sadder note of this election that we will likely lose the proven qualities of Queensland Senator Andrew Bartlett and Victorian Senator Lynn Allison. We should remember that Rudd's election is a chance for progress, not its fulfilment.
Okay, so the first point that I'd like to take up from there is they say, I'm looking forward to a new vision for education, for cooperation on health, an improvement in the plight of Indigenous people, action on climate change and fairer workplace laws. Dale, is that the way you'd sum up the agenda for the future Rudd government?
Well, they were the things that were most talked about, I think, and that stayed in people's minds. I mean, there are other things added along the way, but I think they were the four things he emphasised, that they weren't just promises, they were the agenda for work, and I expect to see them real developments in the next few weeks, particularly if some of his comments since he's become the Prime Minister-elect are anything to go by.
At Warwick, the strategy to get elected this time was very much me too. So this commentator's saying a new vision, but do you reckon there was really that much of a vision in there?
I think what it says is that the Labor Party understood that the economy was robust, that people understand that the economy is robust, and there was a time now to invest in a whole range of social agendas that that we can afford now. And that's where the focus will be. It's to maintain the economy, make sure that it's strong, because ultimately that's what funds these initiatives.
Yeah, because of course the economy and interest rates have been left out of there, haven't they?
That's right. And the economy was almost a neutralised issue. It was neutralised throughout the course of the last 12 months with the Me Tooism, I guess, is how it's been described. It was neutralised in the campaign very early on with the response to the tax package from the coalition. And finally, I think it was cemented by Kevin's declaration at the campaign launch, which was more symbolic than anything else, that the time for profligate spending was over.
Yeah.
And he moved on from there.
Ben, you're presumably cooking up policies for the new government. John Menadue, I gather, chairs your organisation, and he's a significant Labor figure, in fact was very close to Gough Whitlam. What sort of visions have you got in place? I mean, does this economic stringency, does it clip the wings of organisations like yours?
Well, we don't think so. We think that actually there's a...
You're going to do more with less?
Well, we think there's a lot of room to move in fiscal policy. And this kind of, it's a bit of a myth actually that we need to run large surpluses all the time, or indeed even over the course of the business cycle. Sometimes it's appropriate for governments to borrow money to invest in infrastructure to make us all wealthier in the long term.
Going back into debt, that sounds like a Whitlam type of prescription to me. And I think Warwick will agree with me that the conventional wisdom is that puts interest rates up, and housing affordability is another issue that's not in here. Caroline?
Housing affordability?
Well, you don't have one, do you?
What housing affordability? No, yeah, I mean, depends.
Will you hold it against the new government if houses aren't more affordable?
I don't think I will. I think that people have a hope that it will get more affordable, but I don't know that that's something that they actually can see being realised. Certainly, you know, people said 5 years ago, oh, surely house prices aren't going to get any higher, and they did, and they continue to. It's almost like well, we just have to buy in now before it gets worse. I don't think, and I certainly don't seriously expect house prices to significantly decrease.
One of the things that interests me about this is that he says Mr Rudd should acknowledge the debt owed to the Greens in ousting the Howard government. I didn't see a lot of Greens votes on the night. Dale, do you think there's much of a debt owed there to the Greens?
Oh, I often looked at the Greens to make the difference before the votes.
But it's not a Richardson-like election where there was a huge Greens vote and preferences arguably made a difference. There wasn't a huge Greens vote this election.
I don't know what the Greens vote was last
It was
time, but it
significant,
seemed to me significant.
It was up on last federal election.
Yeah, I
vote.
thought
Well,
there
how
was a
come they didn't
significant
get
Green vote.
senators, for example, in Victoria or
They-
New South
they got
Wales?
one
I mean,
extra
one of their
senator.
senators, yeah, but they're losing seats.
No,
Not as
they've
badly
ga-
as the Democrats,
No,
perhaps.
they've gained one seat, Graham. They've gone from 4 to 5.
Well, they lost Kerry Nettle,
Yes, but they've picked up in South Australia.
and there's no third-party candidate now in Queensland, so the Democrats lost and the Greens didn't take it up.
The third party candidate in Queensland is Ron Boswell, isn't it?
Wow.
He doesn't look like a Green to me.
No, that's true.
I'm not sure the Nats are ready to call themselves a third party yet. I guess, all right, there's no fourth-party candidate.
Look, the Greens struggled to punch through. The Labor Party co-opted the broader Green agenda in terms of climate change, and the Greens were largely neutralised and silenced by that. This election, once again, as a lot of elections tend to be, polarises towards the pointy end of the process, and the Greens really were suffocated in that environment. And I guess if you were a Green, you would be wondering how, in a period of time when climate change is on the top of a lot of people's minds, they weren't able to make more inroads.
I think it gets harder to make the inroads if, you know, some of your biggest policies like climate change and Kyoto and, you know, sustainable energy are being picked up by one of the major parties. I mean, people start to go, well, why would I vote for the minor party when the major party has those policies I want, plus other economic policies and more relevant ones?
I guess that also takes us on to the question is what's the role of the minor parties in the Senate likely to be these days, with there being furious agreement on some of the agenda items
You mean
between
they're
the
just gonna get
government and the
reactionary?
opposition. Well, I wonder where they move.
Yeah.
Well, I was also wondering about the Democrats. I mean, is it the demise of the Democrats? You know,
They might all join the Queensland Liberal Party. There's probably more Democrats than there are Queensland Libs, and the Libs need someone to break their deadlocks.
Well, the Democrats are finished, and they have been since the party split over the GST issue, and they have never recovered from that point. They failed to establish relevance, and they're gone.
Okay, so that's it from the site for tonight. Just before moving to the next segment, I'd like to acknowledge Kevin Rennie. He's not a local from Brisbane, but he was certainly involved in the site because it's a national site, and he was reporting from Broome, and we gave him the award for the best performance over the course of the election. So if you want to read some good material on the site, go and do a name search on Kevin Rennie and you'll see some beauts.